Okay, you guys ready to go?
Ready?
Thanks, Micah.
Okay. Call the meeting to order. Start with the pledge. Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Rocio, if you could do the roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Kennedy?
Here?
Vice Chairman Glass?
Here.
Chairman Hewart?
Here.
Commissioner Putnam?
Here.
Commissioner Phillips?
He was
Commissioner
on.
Smith?
Can you hear us?
I think Smith.
It looks like he might have lost. We lost him, I think.
Hello?
Oh, there he is.
There's
There's Michael.
There's... Commissioner Smith? I don't think they can hear.
Here.
Okay, Commissioner Phillips?
I think he's on mute.
Oh, okay. And Commissioner Say?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. So first, let's do the consent calendar, and it's the minutes, recommended action, the minutes,
Yeah, we actually have 3 items on consent
Yeah.
calendar for you. We
Thank
have
you.
the minutes for the November 18th regular Planning Commission meeting, and then we have 2 resolutions. Resolution 20-17, which is to approve a site plan and coastal development permit at 360 Eucalyptus Avenue to reconstruct an existing 1-story, 4-bedroom unit with a 2-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-story family residence, add a 2-foot railing on the 2nd floor and add a roof deck. An existing 3-unit, 2-story structure on the property is not subjected to the scope of work for that project. And then resolution 20-18, which is a site plan and coastal development permit at 315 Camino del Monte to remodel an existing 2-story, 5-bedroom, 3.5-bathroom unit, add a mid-level deck extension, and add a new upper-level deck extension. An existing 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit that was located on the bottom level of the structure was not within the scope of work for that project.
Thank you. Everybody had a chance to read it. Does anybody want to pull one of these off the consent? Would someone like to make a motion to adopt all 3 at the same time?
I'll make a motion to adopt all 3 at the same time.
I will second it
Okay.
with a question. One of the sheets here refers to the October 21st, 2020 agenda minutes, and the other sheet recognizes November 18th.
Oops, yeah.
So do we need to approve them both?
We can note the correction in the motion and then have that reflected in this month's meeting minutes.
Okay, so
Very good.
So I'll amend the motion to reflect the date change.
okay.
Great. Okay, call for a vote.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Glass?
Aye.
Chairman Hewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam? Aye. Commissioner Phillips? Commissioner
He's on
Smith?
mute.
I can.
Oh, there we go.
Thank
There we
you.
go.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
And Commissioner Say?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 1, if you could give us the update or staff report on item number 1.
Yes.
Please.
And do you need to recuse yourself for that
I think
regardless?
you're taking, not for this part, but.
Okay. On item number 1, city staff received a total of 3 letters. 1 requested to be read into the record. However, staff will be moving forward with a recommendation to remove agenda item number 1. And I can go into details, but wanted to know how you wanted to proceed with the letters.
Oh, I've got a question then. So is it the planning commission is going to remove it?
The
Or is
planning
it-
commission would remove that.
Oh, okay,
item.
it's not just the staff, then I will leave. And Bart, you are now the chair. And
Okay.
I think, am I the only one?
You're the only one, correct?
And that's because I live within 500 feet, so.
So one was removed.
Yeah, as soon as he leaves, I'll explain why. Yeah, so item number 1 is a request to modify the conditions of approval at an existing transient rental conditional use permit to add an autoet vehicle to be used by transient guests. The address on the property in question is at 257 East Whitley Avenue. Staff is recommending removing this item off the agenda. When staff was preparing the staff report after the item had already been agendized and the item was submitted by the applicant, it was actually determined that there are no conditions that were placed previously on the CUP that prohibits guests from using an autoet. A review of the Avalon Municipal Code found that in our AMC section 9-8.404 F5 states the following. For vehicles, it says that off-street parking shall be provided on or off-site such that all vehicles bearing permits issued for the unit can be parked off-street except when used pursuant to a temporary permit issued to the owner as provided in Title IX. The owner, agent, and managing agency shall comply with the Avalon Vehicle Ordinance, which 1, permits transient rentals to only use the vehicle which is permitted for the location, and 2, prohibits the owner, agent, or managing agency from charging for the use of the vehicle, except properties that are located in the flat area, and properties located in condominiums known as Bahia Vista, Canyon Terrace, and Sol Vista shall not include a vehicle to be used by transient guests. So currently, there are 2 autoets assigned to the property. One's for the lower unit and one is for the upper unit. The owner was requesting to utilize one of those existing permitted autoets for his transient guests at the upper level unit, which is the one that holds the CUP. He also purchased a brand new golf cart to replace the existing golf cart. This one is electric. It's a lot quieter. He has off-street parking, and because there's no basis to make a motion or to approve, staff was requesting that the commission remove the item off the agenda and to continue to allow them to utilize as provided in the municipal code.
Understand. Anyone want to make a motion that we remove this from the,
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
call for a vote?
Acting Chairman Glass,
Aye?
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam,
Yes,
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
and Commissioner Say.
Yes,
Thank
sorry.
And I'll go grab Eric.
Oh, no, he's 2 and 3.
Okay. So 2 is for,
I just want to state into the record, Chairman Hewart and Commissioner Kennedy will be abstaining from items 2 and 3 due to a property conflict of interest.
okay.
Eric and I are going to have a cocktail.
Okay, Rocio, you want to,
Yes. So item number 3 is a request for a conditional use permit and coastal development permit to allow the renting, I'm sorry, before I start our discussion, according to our records and the LA County Assessor, we discovered that this property actually does contain 3 units. It is not considered a duplex. However, we also discovered that both of these items, units that are coming forward to you, we will continue to move forward with them. They are not affected at all. So item number 3 is a request for a conditional use permit and coastal development permit to allow the renting or leasing of a room or rooms with or without table boards on a dwelling unit for periods of fewer than 30 consecutive days duration at 334 Whitley, upper unit. The owners are James and Aisha Hoffman. The property manager is also listed on this application, which will be the owners acting as well. The property contains 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and is developed with a residential use consistent with the general plan and is allowed under the 2020 growth policy. The property is located in the high density. The saturation analysis indicates that there will be no oversaturation occurring. The proposed CUP is categorically exempt under section 15305 of the state CEQA guidelines, minor alterations in land use limitation, which do not result in change use and or density. The project requires a coastal development permit under section 9/8.102, sections B, 2B of the Avalon Municipal Code. The property is not within 300-foot appealable zone, and the proposed change in use conforms to the certified local coastal plan and complies with all requirements. City staff has not received any comments in favor or in opposition of the CUP. Staff is recommending the Planning Commission find the project categorically exempt under section 15305 of the state CEQA guidelines, adopt the necessary findings as outlined in our staff report to support approval of the coastal development permit, including that the project is not within the 300-foot appealable zone, and find the application is allowed under the 2020 annual growth policy. This concludes my report, and I am available for any questions.
Okay. Discussion before we open a public hearing?
Well, since there are 3 units and it talks about upper and lower, is that upper or?
Okay, so I'm sorry, let me be more descriptive. This property contains 3 levels.
Yeah,
After looking at our records, we discovered that the top unit is where the owners actually live, Aisha and
Yes.
James Hoffman.
Yeah.
The middle level is rented out on a year-round basis.
yeah,
That property is not applying at all, so it's not affected. And the lower unit is where the owner's mother resides. So it's considered owner.
well, okay, but there is somebody who's lived there in one of the units, which I think is probably the middle one, is been there more than a year.
Yes, I
More than
understand.
2 years, okay, so,
That's correct. When we described it, it should have been listed as upper and lower. The middle unit is not part of the CUP application. So there's 2 items. This one is for the upper, and then the other one is for the lower. But we had originally described it as a duplex, not a triplex.
And in that triplex, one of them is currently a year-round.
That's correct.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about the very upper, which the owners are going to continue to live in? But no, they're asking for that.
That is correct.
And then the lower, the middle one remains as a year-round or long-term rental?
That's correct, and that is not for consideration before you.
So it's the upper and the lower?
But right
Correct.
now, it's just the upper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm
There's
just
2 of
trying to
them.
figure
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, it's not, yeah. Are we talking about the center or the bottom unit?
And then one other, well, I don't know, it didn't mention here, the upper unit has a swimming pool. Does that mean that the lower, I don't know. Does that mean that the lower people get to use it also, or it only goes with the upper one, or whatever?
I would say since it is a separate unit, this would only be available to the renters if approved, who are residing on the upper unit.
Yeah. No, that was, somebody asked me that, saying that, you know, if they're both gonna be vacation rentals, would that mean that both of those, because that'll be more noise in the neighborhood? That was the question I was asked.
Anything else from other commissioners before we open this up to public hearing?
Just a clarification from Rocio, did we receive any public comment regarding this?
Well, there's letters here, yeah.
The letters I see are for 257.
I thought we had received
Here's one, yeah.
letter in regards to a concern about the usage of a year-round rental.
From Cheryl Allison.
Oh, yes, would you like me to read this letter into the...
No, I just wanted to make note that we did receive one comment letter.
You guys
That
have
was
that in
all.
your
Well, but the
package?
other one here from Peggy O'Neill, on behalf of Whitley Arms, that would apply to this, because that would be the one that would be close to this one and the next one.
In that one, my understanding is, in the letter, she said that she was reaching out, not with an opinion on the above planning commission agenda items, but more with a general request. So I was going to read that into record at the end, not for any of the discussions for the CUPs, but at the end of the agenda, just for planning commission's consideration.
Yeah, it just, it says where they're located, this, you know, these two issues would be something that would be right across from them or close enough.
Can you read Cheryl Ellison's letter, because I don't have it in front of me.
Of course, I'll read that out to you.
Here, you want it?
I have it here.
Thank you.
City of Avalon Planning Commissioners. I would like to request the Planning Commissioner deny this 2 CUPs at 334 Whitney, items 2 and 3 on tonight's agenda. The buildings and historically maintained 3 year-round housing units, of which we all know the city has a shortage. Of the 3 units, the owners of the property live in the upper unit, which is item number 2 on tonight's agenda. Additionally, the area is high density, with 334 Whitley sharing property lines with 6 other properties. See diagram, including mine at 326B Whitley Avenue. Of those 6 properties, I am the only property owner who lives here year-round. The properties are so close that we can hear every conversation not made inside closed doors. And the upper property at 334 has a large yard with a pool, which, by its very existence, creates additional noise. The current occupants are respectfully quiet, but we all know that people renting vacation homes do not have that same consideration to neighboring properties. The new CUP vacation rental ordinance voted in the City Council last night held the addresses may concern with CUP's vacation rentals going forward. I understand those ordinances are not effective until next year, but please consider how the 2 requested CUPs can negatively affect my family's enjoyment of our home for possibly many years. I respectfully request that you have this letter read into the recording. Sincerely, Cheryl Allison.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have the applicants here tonight, I can see. And we open this up for public hearing before we continue this discussion amongst ourselves. I don't see. Public hearing's open. There is, yeah, I don't know if there's anyone outside. Oh. We're going to close the public hearing. Open it up for discussion amongst ourselves. Anyone like to start? I went up and looked at the property. It is a high-density area, but
Yeah.
all of them are up there. The top place that we're looking at right now is one of two. What I do like about it is someone is living in the center one right now. So one of the 3 units they have is year-round housing. Whether historically or not, it's always been 3 year-round residents. I mean, as long as no one's been living in there renting in the last 2 years, they're available for a CUP. Any other discussion?
Well, so
I actually went up there as well. Can you hear me?
Yep.
And, like Bart said, it is high density. I did drive around. I went up and down a few times to see if I can, see any vacation rental properties in that area. And when I got the map, it does not look saturated up on that, in that area. I did notice that they do have private parking, off-street parking, because I know Whitley is a very congested, high area where there's virtually 0 parking. So the fact that they do have, it looks like they have parking for each unit, which is nice to see. I do understand the concerns that neighbors have. We're living in Kathleen Island and we're on top of each other, back to back. I just want to remind all residents that are near or close by a conditional use permit vacation rental that we do have policies and in effect for the conditional use permit, and if they are violated, they can be revoked. And it's important, if there's something that gets out of hand and noise after a certain time, that you do call the vacation rental company or the police, and please notify the city of Avalon. This is the only way that we can help control and mitigate all the problems or the noise or nuisance that people do say they have with these vacation rentals. There is a process, so please, if anybody is ever getting affected or concerned about it, there are steps to follow to get it resolved.
Yeah, there should be a sign right in the window with the phone number, if you don't know, to call for the management company as well.
no, they're asking for, it's gonna be Jim Hoffman.
Yeah, so it would have to be Jimmy's number that would be in there. And that's the other thing I do sympathize with Cheryl Allison's letter as well.
Oh, yeah.
Living there. But I know having an owner rent out his own place, I think with another tenant in there that lives there year-round, you're much more likely to have someone who's on the ball trying to keep people in line than not. It's his house.
That's true, but I don't know, so they're not gonna be living on site.
They're not going to be living on it, no.
anymore.
No.
But that neighborhood is, and if they've got parking for all 3 units, that's a good thing. I suppose they can rent those other 2 parking spaces out.
Yeah.
Well, if they're vacation rentals, they don't need a parking space, right?
If they're vacation rentals, no, they wouldn't, but is Whitley automatically get a cart?
Whitley would qualify. The only ones where the code explicitly prohibits is anywhere in the flats
Yeah,
or in
because
those
it's so far
named
up the hill,
condominium
you
units.
couldn't rent it out without a cart. No one's going to walk up and down that hill. It's like walking to the canyon.
Right, so as long as there was a permitted autoet that's already assigned to that unit, guests would be allowed to utilize that golf cart.
And and that would not have to be included in this application, that he plans on using it?
It would not. You could, because it's already permitted, as long as they've got off-street parking and there's already an assigned, if the commission wishes, they could impose a condition where it would explicitly prohibit the use of the autoet. But it is allowed under the municipal code.
Okay. So I suppose it is good that they have parking up there.
I'm just saying, but it doesn't mention that in the request, though. So,
Because it's automatically granted.
Yeah.
on the.
Yeah,
Because of where they are up the hill and that, they.
It wasn't included because it's part of the standard
Because-
conditions of approval that are already explicitly codified in the municipal code.
You don't put
So
them in the flats
back,
and-
yeah, in the back of the exhibit, you could find it, but because it's already an allowed, there was no reason to put it into the staff report.
Well, okay, I was thinking there's the difference between it's allowed and called out to be something that could be utilized. Because if they didn't have off-street parking, Whitley, nobody on Whitley can hardly park where they live.
I think that is one of the requirements, that you have to have off-street parking.
Yeah, it has to have off-street parking, so if they didn't have off-street parking, we would have called it out into the.
But I'm just saying, but if it didn't mention in the application.
There's, if you have, I'm sorry to interrupt. On your staff report, if you take a look at page 9, section 5 under vehicles, I'm going to read something that's in here that will,
That's actually on the standard conditions that I was referring to, but we can, for future staff reports, if the commission wishes, we can explicitly state whether it's allowed or prohibited. Just for clarification's sake.
No, it's, I mean, it's just that, okay, if you have off-street parking, then therefore they could just, have that without calling it out, saying as long as there's parking, therefore, they could have a golf cart.
We can move forward with that direction.
Well, I mean, to be clear, because some of this, in the past, people have had to specifically request that, and we've just turned down the one on East Whitley. So, or not turned down, we've pulled it off, because that's not.
We pulled it off the agenda because there was never anything to grant,
You didn't have
because
to
there was
apply
never
for it.
any prohibition on that, and so we did not include that in the staff report because there was no reason, other than explicitly stating that it is an allowed use and they have the adequate parking space, which is what I said we could address in future staff reports. There was no reason to put that in because it's not explicitly prohibited.
Well, I'm just saying that just somehow, that, and granted, East Whitley's a different thing because of the slope, but if that is not explicitly given and then this is understood to be okay, I just think it should be apples to apples, that's all.
I understand.
Especially when this is sort of right across, if you look up the hill, there, that's all, just to make it,
Fair.
make sense. That if you're gonna do it for one, if this, I just would like to see it, because then somebody's gonna come in here and ask for something different and they've got two things they could go with. That's all, just to make it, put the semantics together.
Anybody want to make a motion or discussion?
Paul, just before we make a motion, I just wanted to note for the record, I think we, at the top, this was actually described as item 3, and I just wanted to note for the record, since we are discussing the,
Item 2.
Item 2.
yes, that we are discussing number 2, so any motion with respect to this item would be for item number 2.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I think, Rocio, when you first started, you said 3 and then read the whole 2. But other than that,
I'll make a motion to approve.
I second it.
call for a vote.
Acting Chairman Glass,
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam,
Yes?
Commissioner Phillip,
Micah?
Yes.
Commissioner Say,
Yes?
Yes.
and Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item passes. Number 3.
Okay, item number 3. Item number 3 is a request for a conditional use permit and coastal development permit to allow the renting or leasing of a room or rooms with or without table boards in a dwelling for periods of fewer than 30 consecutive days duration at 334 lower unit. The owner is James and Aisha Hoffman. The property is located in the high density. This property contains 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom and is developed with the residential use consistent with the general plan and is allowed under the 2020 growth policy. The property managers, like I mentioned before, will be the applicants, owner of the property. The property is located within the high density. Our saturation analysis indicates that oversaturation will not occur. The proposed CUP is categorically exempt under section 153 of the state CEQA guidelines regarding minor alterations and land use limitations which not result in change in use, land use or density. The project requires a coastal development permit under section 9/8.102, sections B to B of the Avalon Municipal Code. The property is not within the 300-foot appealable zone, and the proposed changes in use conforms to the certified local coastal plan and complies with all requirements. City has received a comment, which I've already read, opposing this CUP. Staff is recommending the Planning Commission find the property, this project categorically exempt under section 15305 of the state CEQA guidelines. Adopt the necessary findings as outlined in the staff report to support the approval of the coastal development permit, including that the project is not within the 300-foot appealable zone. And find the application is allowed under the 2020 Avalon Growth Policy. This concludes my report, and I am available for any questions.
Okay, it's the same property, basically.
I have a question for Theo. Actually, it just kind of came back to me. Did we ever find out if the Edison Company lifted that 2+, you know how we did the 2+2 for water? Because I just want to make sure if we're approving these permits that the people that we're approving for still know that if it's just like that's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, that it's just for 2 people, not 2+2, until the water is lifted. We get approval from, that's authorized from the Edison Company.
I did speak to the Southern California Edison, and the city is no longer under any water restrictions. I did not ask specifically whether there was continued imposition of any occupancy limits on conditional use permits for transient rentals. I would believe that if it was lifted, that the requirement would also be lifted.
Well, back before you, when we were in water, stage 3, we were approving them, but not letting them have the +2, and that once it was lifted, that it would automatically, they wouldn't have to come back to us. But I'm just, it officially, I thought we were waiting on them officially to give us that, the permission, but I'm just asking for people, you know, that we're approving now, that if they're still required to have only 2 per bedroom and not the 2 that they're not renting with the extra 2.
Well, there's one other part to that. If, does Edison know that it's 3 units? If the county assessor doesn't know that it's, or if they do know that it's 3 units, what does Edison think is there?
It is listed on the LA County Assessor's website, which they also utilize as 3 units.
I don't, okay, but I'm saying, that's the county assessor. Edison, what does Edison carry it as? 2 or 3?
I have no idea what Edison has that listed
Well, when we're
as.
talking about having water, you know, if,
I would have assumed that once we were all taken off water rationing, which has been a year, that would have been lifted.
That was my assumption as
The
well.
2 would go back on,
No, but-
It
So
was
you're
my
talking
assumption
two-
too, Bart,
two
however,
addition-
they're still not handing out allocations,
Yeah,
so
well,
that's why, and I was under the impression that we had to wait until they worked it out with the PUC
Yeah, well,
about their
you're-
findings, and
we're
their report
talking
came back
two-
a while ago, but I don't believe I heard anything from the city,
I
what the status was
understand that,
at.
but
That's
what-
all I'm asking.
What I'm saying is, does Edison list that property, forget how many people can sleep in each unit, the 2+2, does Edison think that's a duplex? Or does Edison know that that's a triplex?
Commissioner Putnam, Edison, assessor, everybody knows that it is a 3-unit property. That was just a mistake on
That's what I
my end.
mean, you said the assessor, but I didn't know if Edison also, if there was that.
Yeah, staff did not follow up with Edison to ask what their understanding was as to the number of units that were listed on that property. My understanding is that they go based off of the LA County Assessor's Office.
I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, I understand. We can follow up with Edison and find out what their understanding is, but I won't have that answer today.
No, if that's what they do, I'm from the school of assume nothing. So I do not assume that Edison knows what the assessor's doing or what they base stuff on, that's all. I just,
More discussion on this property? Should we reach out to Edison and ask if that's been lifted so that we can let people know who had them, approved for 2?
I will ask that. Like I said, that was not a question that I had asked as part of the annual growth policy, but I will get clarification and bring that item back, or that answer back prior to the January 20th Planning Commission meeting.
Okay. Further discussion or motion?
We would need to open the public hearing
Oh, excuse me.
before possible
I'm
motion
sorry, just the public hasn't shown up.
on this item as well.
My bad. Let's open the public hearing.
Sure, but
Applicant is,
we still need to formally open the public hearing and then close it before there's a motion.
okay. I'd like to formally open the public hearing. There's no one outside. And we're going to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Okay, at this point, we would either take a motion or discuss this more.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Micah makes a motion to approve. So we have a second?
So, can I ask one question?
Sure.
So, the bottom unit has been, it's not being occupied, right? And the owner occupied the top one, and the bottom one just got finished construction?
The lower unit is rented out as an owner builder to the mother of the owner. So Aisha's mother lives on the bottom unit.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I just received a message from the owner of the property that says, and they have 3 water meters.
That would say Edison knows then?
Yeah.
Okay, but that at least
Thank you,
clarifies that.
Commissioner Smith.
Since we had a motion on the floor, before the clarifications, I would ask before there's a second that Micah just essentially remake the motion, if the commission is ready to move forward.
Micah, would you like to?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because that was a question that was asked of me, because I was under the impression when I got the packet that nobody's renting the units and they qualified for this, the application.
Okay. So Micah, would you like to make your motion again as per council?
Yes, I'll motion to approve.
Do we
I'll
have
second it.
Any further discussion? Call for a vote?
Acting Chairman Glass,
Aye?
Commissioner Putnam,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
and Commissioner Say.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can bring,
On your way out, you can tell the other guy.
yeah, I've got to go the other way, exactly. You can have his gavel back.
So good evening, Commissioners. This is for a public hearing for item number 4 at 74 Gaviota, Building 18. Vice Chair Glass is recusing himself due to proximity to the location of this address. As mentioned, item number 4 is a request for a conditional use permit and coastal development permit to allow the renting of or leasing of a room or rooms with or without table board in a dwelling unit for periods of fewer than 30 consecutive days duration at 74 Gaviota, Building 18 within Hamilton Cove condominium units. I would like to note that this applicant was actually approved at the November Planning Commission meeting that we just had. However, the address was erroneously listed as 74 Playa Azul rather than the actual address of 74 Gaviota. The error unfortunately was noticed after the hearing, and staff immediately notified the applicant, who was very understanding. To remedy this, staff is bringing the item back to Planning Commission for consideration of approval. So the owner and applicant is Diane Wright, and the property is located within the low-density residential zone. The property contains 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and is developed with a residential use consistent with the general plan and is allowed under the 2020 growth policy. The property manager for the unit is listed as Hamilton Cove Retail Estate and Vacation Rentals. The property is located, as mentioned before, in Hamilton Cove, which contains approximately 185 units. The Hamilton Cove Homeowners Association generally allows transient rental use, as evidenced by the fact that over 65% of the units within the development has been granted CUPs for transient rental use. A saturation analysis is not relevant for transient rental units within Hamilton Cove, as the use is allowed under the rules of the Hamilton Cove Homeowners Association. The proposed CUP is categorically exempt under section 15305 of the state CEQA guidelines regarding minor alterations and land use limitations, which do not result in changes in land use or density. The project does require a coastal development permit under section 9-8 102B2V of the Avalon Municipal Code, and the project is within the 300-foot appealable zone, and proposed change in use conforms to the certified local coastal plan and complies with all requirements thereof. Staff have not received any comments in favor or in opposition of this CUP application. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission find the project categorically exempt under section 15305 of the state CEQA guidelines, adopt the finding necessary as outlined in the staff report to support the approval of the coastal development permit, including that the project is within the 300-foot appealable zone, and find the application is allowed under the 2020 annual growth policy. So that concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, any questions for staff before we open the public hearing?
No?
Okay, seeing none, open the public hearing. Make it loud. Anybody? Nobody wishing to testify? Close the public hearing. Any motions or discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve. Any discussion?
I take it the motion is with the 3 findings, or the 3 recommendations.
Yeah, and that's with staff recommendation as a part of the motion?
Yes.
Affirmative. And the second?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Bob. Okay. Seeing no one wishing to discuss it, we'll call for a vote, please.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes?
Chairman Hewart?
Yes?
Commissioner Putnam?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
And Commissioner Say?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go get, or you gotta wait for Bart?
So the next item before you is item number 5, and this is the proposed 2021 annual growth policy. The city's municipal code stipulates that the Planning Commission review the permitted growth in the preceding 10 months, review the effects and demands of development and any development upon the city's natural resources, and determine by resolution the amount and type of growth as well as any city priorities for growth that the city will permit for the following year. As per Southern California Edison, the city is not in any stage of water rationing. However, SCE or Edison has, in an effort to accurately ascertain and update the safe annual yield, delayed issuing any additional freshwater water allocations on the wait list until a related study has been finalized and accepted by the California Public Utilities Commission, or the CPUC. Over the past year and a half, Edison has been engaged in a comprehensive update to the standard formula used in determining that safe annual yield. The existing formula has remained unchanged for a number of years, and over time, these standards have changed, due in part to industry practices and legislative policy and requirement updates. The study is anticipated to be finalized within the next few months, at which Edison will be submitting the study for the CPUC approval. However, within the next few weeks, staff did reach out to Ron Haidt at Southern California Edison, and he informed us that the Edison will be requesting an exception to the standard, to one of the standards, so that they can begin to allocate water sooner prior to the study's acceptance. So that will get filed within the next few weeks, and when it get confirmation, I will bring that back to the Planning Commission for that. As a result, the growth policy being recommended allows for the same type of development as in previous years, and almost all require confirmation from Edison that adequate fresh water is available. Just of note, city still has the discretion to refuse to issue a permit for construction or request modification to the proposed number of units to be built, even if Edison has approved an allocation for the fresh water. And those stipulations are included in the staff report, and I can go over those should the Planning Commission wish, but essentially they're the same as what was approved last year as well.
Any questions?
I have one. Sure. Since Edison is currently modifying their water allocation, wouldn't it be more reasonable to hold this, approving our growth resolution until such time that happens?
In the code, it says that we need to pass that in November or December. Edison did caution staff that the recalculation of the standard is likely to actually be more conservative than the original safe annual yield is. Part of that is due to the fact that there are some factors that were never accounted for in the original formula that are not allowed to be included, or that need to be included in there. So one of the things that was used as an example is water for storage for fire suppression should not be included, but fire suppression in other instances should. So that potentially makes that safe annual yield calculation more conservative rather than lease.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. If I could get a motion?
Chair, apologies. This is also I believe, a public hearing.
Oh, sorry. Any questions from staff before I open the public hearing?
I think you should open the public hearing.
Thank you. Open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to comment? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Thank you for the reminder. Any motions or discussion after the motion? And I think it would be for the adoption of Resolution XX-XX, which is the growth resolution.
I'll make a motion to, for staff recommendation for the unnumbered resolution to go on to the city council for their approval.
I'll second it.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay, and so it's moved and seconded. Any discussion before the vote? Seeing none, we'll see if you call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Glass?
Aye?
Chairman Heward?
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam?
Yes,
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
And Commissioner Say?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think that concludes the public hearings, but we have planning director reports, please.
Yeah, I've got two updates and one letter that I can read into the record. The first was the Planning Commission asked for clarification on two different items. One of them was clarification from Southern California Edison on the stage of water rationing, and as mentioned in the annual growth policy and in previous conversations, we are no longer under any water restrictions or water rationing requirements. However, there are some stipulations in terms of the safe annual yield that is affecting freshwater allocations. We're hoping that in the next few weeks that there's a request for an exception, and if granted, that would actually free up some additional freshwater allocation, so we will continue to keep everyone notified. The second clarification, I will pass over to Isaac Rosen, the city attorney, on an update on the ADU water requirements. And would you like to do that first before moving on to the written record? Isaac, why don't you give him an update on the ADU water requirement?
Sure. So as Mike said, and this has come up before, certainly the commission is very interested in the status from Southern California Edison, and Mike spoke a bit to that. Mike and I also talked a bit about, because there had been questions from the commission previously about the intersection between the CPUC rules via Southern California Edison's water allocation and our ADU ordinance, where we have this sort of required ministerial approval for accessory dwelling units in the city. And I think in sort of talking with Mike and reviewing the water allocation rules, I think it's probably important for the commission to recognize, ADUs are still a form of development in the city, so they are subject to those SCE water allocation rules. I don't see a preemption issue or conflict with our state ADU law or a local ADU ordinance with those water allocation rules. The state ADU believes that there's going to be sufficient water and sewer for any new ADUs, and they are subject to those same requirements, but the city's process is sort of the ministerial process that's limited by our state law standards. So with that being said, one thing that Mike and I also discussed is that the city attorney's office can work with city staff to incorporate some minor changes to that ADU ordinance that sort of addresses more explicitly the distinction between our role and that of SCE with respect to water allocation, and that minor change could also be included with a couple other minor revisions that have come down since the time the city passed the ADU ordinance. So since that time, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the state agency, has come down most recently this fall with its own set of interpretation guidelines for ADUs. And the legislature actually made one very minor change since the time we adopted. So the idea was that we will work with city staff and that would come back to the commission, and part of that would be just inclusion of a more express reference within our ordinance to the role of Southern California Edison with respect to water.
So with that being said, ADUs require an allocation from Edison Company.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay, now, even though the state law says otherwise.
Well, I mean, there's language in the state law that talks about capacity fees and hookup charges, but the state law says expressly that there has to be sufficient water and sewer service for any ADU, and that the city would consult with Southern California Edison, which we did when Amanda was bringing this item before the commission. So there is limits under state law with respect to capacity fees and utility fees and hookups, but there is sort of express statutory language about, that ADUs must be subject to sort of sufficient water and sewer service.
So the Edison Company will determine that, or does the city determine that?
Well, the city just has a ministerial set of checklists for passing or approving an ADU. So to the extent Southern California Edison has to provide the water allocation, that's sort of outside of the city's role when it reviews an application for an ADU. It would be akin to any other development application or permit that might be subject to certain requirements, under our adopted building code or other items where there might be something that doesn't necessarily come before the city decision makers.
So that was the whole point of this ADU that the state passed. So if they didn't have to come in front of our body. And so now I'm a little confused. So what I'm confused about is, so they still do it administratively, but how can they do it administratively if we don't know if they can qualify for or get the water allocation? And number two is this something that we have to put in? And right now, as it stands, with the ADUs that were approved, or ADUs, say somebody comes in tomorrow for an ADU, is this already in our municipal code, city municipal code, that it requires a water allocation? Or?
Our ADU ordinance is solid. There's no issue with it. I think maybe one way to think about it is akin to, and I'm thinking of another agency now, but if you have an agency that requires sort of like as part of the fire code that, a fire department sort of approves something, that may not come as part of the city's ministerial review of an ADU. So it could be something that's contained within, for instance, the building code or the plumbing code or some of these other requirements that are outside sort of the limited scope of what we're approving for the ADU. I don't have an issue with our ADU ordinance. I think we could make it more clear with respect to water allocation, but I'm not concerned that that we have an issue with the ADU ordinance passed by the city.
And please,
I was there when it first started, and I heard it, and Eric might have been there, but that you build an ADU on your property, you have to be, 50% of the.
Right.
And then it said you hook up to you pay for the permit to hook up to the existing utilities, which means when somebody hooks up to the existing utilities that they have sewer and water automatically. I mean, doesn't that make sense, right?
I'm not sure I totally follow.
Without allocation, because you go to the office, to planning department, you say, I'm doing an ADU, you follow within the guidelines of the ADU, and you pay for hookup to the utilities, which is quite a bit of money, and you hook up to all the utilities, the existing utilities. That was the whole point of the ADU.
Well, so I think
not create another utility.
I guess I'm thinking about it more narrowly since we are not the agency and it's actually Southern California that handles the water allocation component. But I also want to make sure, I mean, one thing is we can bring this back as as a public hearing item and discuss, I think, in more detail as part of a more sort of robust discussion of it. Yuli, I think they're good points, and I don't want to misspeak about the law, but I think there's a distinction between the hookup and our requirements under state law for that, and more broadly, the sufficiency of water service for any EDU.
The whole point was you hook up to existing meters. Therefore, you don't have to pay for another new meter, which is very costly. And this was the state trying to create more housing.
Isaac?
So all I'm saying is we need clarification, because when you're taking money and charging for existing to hook up, that I'm assuming you get the water. And that's what I read, and that's what I deciphered from this state ADU law. And that's how it was presented to us when it first came to us. And I asked, and we can go back and watch. And so that's why now I'm confused. So if we could definitely clear it up, because you don't have to get another meter. That's what the state says. You are not required to get a meter, your own meter for an ADU. So I'm confused.
Isaac?
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't mean to interject in here, but correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is it's not the issue with the metering. This is no different than if someone were to go in and propose to add an additional bedroom or an expansion. There's still a water allocation that needs to be requested from Southern California Edison, because the CPUC has granted them the authority to regulate development based on available water. And so the accessory dwelling unit, they can move through the process, they can get that approved administratively, and we can approve their site plan and everything else. Where the hiccup really comes in is when they go to pull the building permit is contingent on whether there is fresh water available, and the person that controls that, or the entity that controls that, is Southern California Edison. So it's not an issue of whether they're on a separate meter and whether they're getting the charge. The bigger issue is you're adding additional development, which requires a freshwater allocation from Edison, regardless of whether it's an accessory dwelling unit, an expansion, or a remodel of an existing structure, or a new development altogether.
Yes, and I think, apologies, go ahead.
How can you take these fees for the plans and for all that without water?
We encourage people to, before they even submit anything for review, to apply for or to seek out guidance from Southern California Edison. Some people wish to go through the process, and in the event that they need to be placed on the wait list, everything's been approved administratively, and then when the allocation gets freed up, they are then able to pull the building permit and then proceed forward with construction. They are exempted because an ADU is not subjected to certain capacity charges or development impact fees, as long as it meets certain thresholds and requirements. So there are some cost savings there, but that's the applicant's choice.
And I do want to pause here to just say, I do think we can distinguish the two issues, but I think it would be more appropriate to do this, since there's a sort of pretty robust discussion, to do this as it's listed as our agenda, but as an actual agendized item with some of the items we're talking about, and then we can try to address more fully so that the conversation can be more robust and agendized as its own sort of item.
I think that makes sense, because I agree with what Yoli's saying. It goes against why they wrote the law. They wrote the law to create housing. You cannot create housing on Catalina Island. It goes completely against the reason they wrote it.
And with all
Because
due
when you
respect,
here, you
Michael,
have to wait for water.
I understand what you're saying clearly, Michael, but that's not how it was presented when it first came to us. And that's not what we heard, and that's not what was stated. And you can go back to the meetings far, you know, from when it first came, because that's not, what you just said is not what was told to us when these ADUs started. So I think we need to do some research. I think we need to clarify it. When people are coming back for plan checks and money's being accepted through the department, and then there's issues after hundreds of thousands of dollars were put into properties, ADUs, and I mean, that's just, it's a huge mess. So I think it needs to be clarified, and I think the information we got maybe was wrong in the beginning. And that's why I want to clarify it, so that when people move forward to creating these ADUs, to create housing, which the state put this in effect to do, it just needs to be clear.
We will put this on a future agenda item. I will say I was not involved when this first came to the Planning Commission, so I will go back and I will research into that and present findings when we have that on another agenda, and we can continue to provide hopefully some clarification on there. The one thing I would like to just make sure that is clarified prior to ending the discussion is no person submitting an application for an ADU does so under the guise that they're going to be improved. We explicitly tell them that if they would like to proceed forward through that process, that they may not be able to build, and we will not move forward unless they explicitly tell us to. So we're not trying to take advantage of anybody and give them any false impressions about going through a process, not knowing whether or not they're going to be able to build that ADU. So I just wanted to make that clear. Staff under my direction have been explicit in that as well.
Thank you, Michael.
And may I suggest, I think having a separate agenda item for this is a great idea, but it would be important to have Edison here as well, because I'm looking at the water allocation waiting list right now, and there are some ADUs on that list, but they're trumped by a 48-unit complex, a 24-unit complex, a hospital. There's a bunch of things ahead of them water-wise, and I'd like to know how Edison's going to manage an ADU over, new development.
Yeah, we can ask for that clarification. My understanding is that it's just a first come, first served list, so depending on where they fall, I don't know if they prioritize or how they prioritize. But we can get clarification.
An example of that is item number 1 on the list, wait list number 1 is Rancho Escondido for a vineyard and a resort requiring 8, the unit usage is 8.81 acre feet. And then a little while later, there's another 40-unit complex that's going to require another 10 acre feet. So the ADUs that are currently on this list will never see their water if that's going to be the case.
And the water's like 0.009 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and that is listed by application date.
Gotcha.
Right.
But you're right, they never see it.
Right, they'll never see it.
Okay, anything else?
That's it for that. So we'll be back at this issue.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. So the other item that I had was a letter that was submitted by Peggy O'Neill. I had a request to read this into record from Chair Eric Hewart. So I'm going to do that right now. She writes, "Good afternoon. These are difficult times. I am reaching out as a member of the Whitley Arms Board of Directors, not with an opinion on the above Planning Commission agenda items, but with a sincere request. It has become evident that due to postal problems, pandemic obstacles, not to mention disrupted holiday travel plans, a number of our owners did not receive timely notice of Wednesday's public hearing. I received mine in my postal box on Friday, and quite frankly, at that time, I was so sadly distracted by the immediate urgency of COVID increases in our small community that I didn't call the city with inquiries about the timing until Monday. Over the weekend, I had to send cell phone shots of the notices to one board member who could not travel back on the boat. Another property owner under a doctor's care on the mainland called and wanted me to explain which building on our street was applying for transient rentals. Respectfully, most of the owners of these 19 units were a part of the huge land purchase and a difficult condo conversion process many years ago that made us a solid part of this neighborhood. The issue of transient rental was discussed at length when we created our condo contracts and restrictions. The majority of our units are primary dwellings of full-time residents of Avalon who have, in the past, received notices of this type in uniform manner. They then responded individually as property owners. Because each neighbor deserves to individually consider their position to these proposed changes, and because we know that some have not had access to the mailed notice, would the City and Planning Commission consider postponing actions on these applications until their next meeting? The pandemic, the overburdened postal system, and the holidays have made this process problematic. I was able to speak with 2 of the 4 other board members copied above, and the informal consensus was that we would ask for additional time to address these concerns, which would ensure that everyone could plan to participate in the hearing in some pandemic-adjusted fashion if they felt the need. Please forward this to the Planning Commission individual members and feel free to contact me with any specific instructions. Thanks for your attention, Peggy O'Neill.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody comment? None? Okay. Any commission reports? Any planning commissioners have anything they'd like to add? Seeing nothing? Lost my agenda.
I'd like to wish everybody a happy holiday
Oh, yeah.
Ditto.
Thank you.
and a happy new year.
Yeah, it
And
looks like.
stay safe.
Yeah. Oh, I've got actually a request. It's my understanding the city council did adopt the amendment to the conditional use permits for transient rentals.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Yes, last night at the city council meeting, after discussion, council moved forward with the second reading of the proposed ordinance for the conditional use permit transitioning to a transient rental licensing scheme. It was approved in a 3-2 vote. It will take effect beginning February 1st of 2021. So staff will work with the city attorney's office to develop a procedure for that transition. Just as a reminder, anybody with an existing CUP will continue to be allowed to keep that CUP. It will transfer to the first property owner, and then following the second sale, it does immediately expire, and anybody wishing to continue to rent that unit out transiently would apply for a license. City staff will also bring back a proposal to modify the fees for council consideration, and we will seek Planning Commission guidance on that as well for the fee schedule that is commensurate with processing and administering the license rather than the CUP. So those likely will be reduced because there's an annual fee that's associated with renewal on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really pleased that that passed after all the time and energy that went into that, a couple of years and a lot of staff time and a lot of legal staff time that went into it. So it's nice that it got passed, and hopefully that'll hold for a while and we won't have to look at CUPs for a little bit. Anything else?
Good night, Tony.
Yeah, good night,
Good night,
Tony.
Tony.
Merry Christmas. Cool.